This is the Final Word Cricket Podcast, Season 18, Episode 3. Adam Collins with you and Jeff Lemon with me. This is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm. We'll tell you more about them in the middle of the show. It's a lovely time of year. The second round of the county championship is complete. You'll hear more about that a little bit later as well. There's been a most important meeting in Zimbabwe, or series of meetings that they have with the ICC board over there. Olympics news that spills out of that too. There's been a cricketing knighthood, lots of stuff going on in England, an exhilarating Australia A versus England A women's unofficial test match that finished yesterday. Some nerd pledge in there as well. Hello to you, Jeff, in Lisbon.
Hello, good morning. Well, as it is now, it may not be when people are listening to this, because who knows where you are around the world. But yes, we're here. It's April, which means it's okay in both hemispheres, I guess. It hasn't got to the horrible bit of autumn yet from where we are from in Melbourne, and spring is sort of starting to stretch its legs in the Northern Hemisphere. So hopefully everybody's happy where they are.
It's comedy festival time in Melbourne, which when anyone asks me when the best time to go to Melbourne is, that, well, the footy finals is pretty good, very good, excellent. Comedy festival's kind of a close second, I think, if you're trying to pick your moment.
Yeah.
The Melbourne test is terrific as well, but it's a different vibe because it's a quieter time in the city itself and the adjoining areas. But
it's Christmas, but footy finals aren't every day, comedy festivals every day. You've got 4 weeks of going to see, I like just doing the random grab bag thing of just go on the website and go, pick 10 things I've never heard of and just buy a job lot, and then once you've done it, you're like, well, I got to go to these shows now, and pick the shows that are going to have 15 people at them, for the comedians who, that extra person really makes a difference in the audience. And sit up the front. This is one of my biggest bugbears in life. If you go to a comedy show, sit up the front. What are people so afraid of? Everyone's like, oh, I don't want to, no, that front row, that looks terrifying. Sit up the front, support artists, laugh, be there. Just cluster at the back, you little weirdos. Go and sit in the front row.
And embrace the fact that you might be included in a bit of crowd work.
Copper spray.
If you're in rows 1, 2, 3, or 4, you're more like, and we go to, as you know, we do the Edinburgh swing each year with the Final Word cricket team, and we've been conditioned to being used as a little bit of crowd work, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So be part of that wherever you are. Enjoy Melbourne at this time of year. Speaking of our crew, they've been running diligently, the Edinburgh lot. Who are going up there for the final weekend in May. We've got our first Zoom meeting next week to talk about fundraising and physical prep and how long people have ran and so on. And after my long weekend in Spain, I needed a few days to recover generally from that. But I've been running again. I've been out there. I got lost yesterday. I ran so far in one direction, didn't quite know where I was, had to get an Uber home. I couldn't get back to I basically needed to get home in time to collect Peggy. And by the time I'd finished running a long way in one direction, I'm like, fuck, I have no idea where I am. I've not been in that direction before. I looked up Google Maps. How do I get back via public transport? It's like, well, that's going to take you 47 minutes. If I ran the other way, it'd be about 45 minutes the other way or something like that. So the indignity of calling an Uber went on a run. Not ideal.
I would have assumed surely that would be reserved for blowing out an Achilles or something, yes. To have to get the Uber home, admitting defeat. But you just Forrest Gumped it, just ran so far you couldn't get the bus back.
Well, I noticed on one side of me there were these football fields, and you know what I'm like. I see the other side, there was a big, I wouldn't call it a paddock, but it was a big stretch of green. I'm like, oh, that could be a cricket ground. I wonder whether there is a cricket ground. So I probably ran a kilometre in that other direction, and then I kind of realised that I'd left the creek that I was trailing. Then I tried to do a hairpin turn, and that's when things went awry, and realised I was in a place called Barnet, which is 2 suburbs over. Anyway, all's well that ends well. At least I'm running well. So that's coming up in May. It's not too late to join for the 10K. Why wouldn't you? It's going to be a cracking weekend. Jeff's there running the 10K. So is my wife, Rachel. So are many others around Arthur's Seat, which is probably the nicer of the circuits around the lovely picturesque Arthur's Seat. Then on Sunday,
but they don't have a chairlift that always collapses, and that's where I feel that they're letting themselves down. That's where Arthur's Seat in Victoria on the Mornington Peninsula, hometown pride. You've got to have a chairlift that falls down once a year, like the Montague Street Bridge that it devours a truck every 3 months. It's a tradition. It's a Melbourne tradition.
It's a bit like how our Ferris wheel in Melbourne hasn't been functional for like 20 years. The one that sits down
because it broke because it got too hot. Remember when like we had the hot summer and all of the struts like fractured and cracked because the steel couldn't cope with 40-degree temperatures.
And then you and I went and recorded a podcast in one of the capsules.
Yeah, that was after they'd renewed it, I think.
And at the time, I'm like, I don't feel comfortable about this. I like having a Ferris wheel that doesn't work. And I like the fact that the Montague Street Bridge has a truck run into it, once a week. And so it goes.
And it's a curious Ferris wheel. I haven't been up the London Eye, but I imagine you get quite a nice view. I've seen people take pictures from the top and the view looks nice. You got the Ferris wheel in Melbourne when you could, RIP, and you looked at the top of Costco and the dock area and you couldn't see any of the city. It didn't stir. I've never written a poem about the roof of Costco.
And no one is writing a poem about the hearts and minds of Melbourne being captured by Docklands, full stop. Never quite happened, did it? Lots of stuff never there, but none of it really cuts through. So, yeah, Edinburgh, it's a thing. Be there with it. We'll be fundraising pretty enthusiastically for the TAVs as we build up to that. And our next TAVs thing, which we've announced on the pod only a couple of days ago, Jeff, we can finally talk publicly about the 18th of August. So if you missed our collaboration episode with Zero Ducks Given, which is quite good fun, with Toby and Norcross, we had to squeeze that in during the lunch break the other day at the Oval, but it worked okay. We are playing a game against each other. We've been given, I'd say almost gifted Wormsley at mates rates, which is just a lovely thing from the estate to do for us. Wormsley, along with Arundel, but I have a preference for Wormsley, the most beautiful grounds in England, just set up perfectly. This has been purpose built to be like the festival ground, the rolling hills, the thatched roof, the dimensions being exactly the same as the Oval on the playing surface. It's and it's an absolute road to bat on. So we're
thatched roof and the thatched roof cottages. So they play the Duke of Norfolk's 11 at Arundel. Can we play the Duke of Norcross 11 at Wormsley?
Why not? That's a great idea. Maybe that's how we could rebrand it. What we're going to do though is let you come and join us. Why wouldn't we? The marquee is filling fast, which is great news. I say that a lot of people have been in touch with the taverners over the last 48 hours to say they want to be in the marquee. I'll tell you this for nothing. 90 quid is cheap by the normal standards that marquee goes for. So that's your dinner or lunch rather, entertainment, glass of champagne type energy, or 20 quid just to be there on the rolling banks of the estate, potter around, look at the Opera House, go to the library. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to be and to watch cricket. In our team, we'll be recruiting. It'll be Jeff and me, of course, but there'll be some listeners. There'll be some pros. There'll be some celebrities. It'll be kind of that kind of afternoon, or it'll start at 12:30. The game will end around 4:30. There'll be a Q&A. There'll be a bit of mucking about on the hill there with the people we get along. And we can all clear out. And
can we have a competition to roll people down the hill and see who can get there first?
It's a lovely idea. How many people will get pongoed up above that hill when bowling? We'll see. Hopefully, if we get some of those pros involved, it could be quite exciting on that front. So 18th of August, book the day off work. The link's in the show notes to buy a ticket. Come along, bring your mates. And yeah, it's not often that you can just rock up to Wormsley and watch cricket. Normally, you need to be sort of there as part of an event. And yeah, we're opening that up. And every pound that we raise is going towards the Lord's Taverners, which we're very proud of.
Let's see if we can get Andy Caddick there so you can abuse him on the field. Yeah,
we will. Actually, it's a good idea. We'll get Caddy down. I don't know whether we should get him to play with us or play with Norcross and Toby. We've all played a lot of Tabs cricket together, so I'm sure Caddy will be there. Gower has got to umpire. I think Gadding's umpiring as well, so that'll be fun. And we've got a lot of other final word volunteers, umpires and scorers and that type of thing. So it's going to be a pretty special day, the sort of thing that we never could have dreamed of even a couple of years ago. It reflects that we're having a pretty good time of it at the moment as a pod, which means we get these great interviews. Kemar Roach, Jeff, the chat I had with him this time last week, what a beautiful man. Like the beaming smile. I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest with you, because I've wanted to speak to Kemar for like 3 years and never been successful in getting the interview lined up. And I didn't know whether that was just him not being that keen on doing media or whatever else it was. But once that tape was rolling, and before and after for that matter, he was a proper gentleman and really got into the swing of things and into the spirit. So if you haven't listened yet, he was great on lots of topics, but I think the warmth of the man is the thing that stands out most.
And a little correspondence during the week from David Hughes, who captains the Tasmanian blind cricket side, letting us know that the Australian women's blind team is playing Pakistan in Adelaide starting in a few days. So we'll hopefully have an eye on that next week to see how they go. But they're playing 5 T20s. They're playing some of them under lights. So it's a first to have that Australian side playing Pakistan and a 5 T20 series. It's massive for them. So if you're in Adelaide, get along?
I think everyone's been in Adelaide in the last couple of weeks with Gather Round and the Shield final and so on. So the Indian summer of South Australia continues with that women's blind cricket tournament against Pakistan this weekend. Jeff, last weekend in Harare in Zimbabwe, there was the most significant ICC board meeting. These happen once a year. Well, they do 2 meetings, but this tends to be the one in the spring, where in the northern spring, where you get most of the chunky information. I don't really know where to start here. Maybe we should start with Afghanistan, because in the past we've been like really critical of the board for just refusing to talk about it. It's like a don't mention the war, literally don't mention the war situation. But like, fair play, the first press release that came out of this did relate to Afghanistan. Maybe you can colour in the gaps here.
Yeah, well, they've actually moved. The ICC has moved ostensibly. This is being backed by India, Australia, and England financially, but this is massive news that they're going to fund the Afghanistan women's players in exile. And that's, I mean, it's such a breakthrough. The ICC disgraced themselves by ignoring this for years and by not doing anything until pressure was put on them. And I think a lot of credit has to go to a lot of the reporting from people like Alison Mitchell and Tracy Holmes and so on, who really hammered this issue and made sure that it remained prominent and made sure that it was prominently discussed on the BBC a lot, and that pressure was maintained, which translated through to pressure being placed sort of in parliamentary terms within the UK and politically within Australia as well. And eventually they've coughed up what they should have coughed up years ago, which was acknowledging these players as being as needing support, and that these teams are going to be funded. These players will have access to high performance structures within Australia. So Cricket Australia will support that. And they'll be so the players who were contracted, because there were 25 odd contracts handed out for development players shortly before the Taliban takeover, those players will be offered the support to essentially remain representatives of Afghanistan, the country, even though they're not connected to the Afghanistan Cricket Board, which is under the thumb of the Taliban. So they'll be able to operate independently of the Afghanistan Cricket Board. I still think that's the shortcoming, is that the Afghanistan board should be paying for this. This money should be being requisitioned from the Afghanistan Cricket Board's cut. It shouldn't be having to be funded as a goodwill gesture by other boards. But however it's happening, hook or crook, it is happening, and that's the most important bit. And it's just such a huge breakthrough that this is finally going to be supported.
Yeah, and we whack them when they deserve to be whacked. But, you know, ECB, CA, the diplomatic efforts there, it's not nothing when you hear nothing sometimes. Like, the instinct is when you hear nothing that you think nothing's happening, but clearly behind the scenes. And look, Richard Gould was quite punchy on this late last year, I reckon, maybe in the last 6 months or so. And certainly what CA said, I know they didn't go all in on that game at Junction Oval, but the very fact that it was like a Cricket Australia press release, that of itself tells a certain story. And Nick Hockley, the acting
and applied pressure too. You've got this team playing. You have them play a match. The highlights are out there. They're invited to a big function at the Test match at the MCG.
That's right.
They're honoured and feted, and then you can't really at that point go, okay, that was it. See you later. You'll never play again. So this is the next step, which is significant.
I'm aware that not all of the players are in Australia. Of that 25, I think half a dozen of them don't live in Australia. So I hope that this story extends beyond the exiled cricketers in Australia. I'm sure it will. I can't imagine.
Well, that's the thing. You can't just have one group.
No.
It's got that group then has to be able to be renewed. You've got to develop these players, but also develop younger players into the future, and there has to be a means to access this group for, because people are still making their way out of Afghanistan. So I don't know how that's going to work in terms of recruiting, in terms of eligibility, but those parts of it are really important.
Yeah, and finding ways for this team to ultimately play. And you're right to cite Tracy and Ali. They're two of many, but two especially. And of course, the work that Mel Jones has done, we mentioned, and Mel Jones' team more widely, they got recognised last week by MCC for the Spirit of Cricket Award. Like, I'm sure they're 3 steps ahead. It's just about making sure that it gets the right support where we can all collectively play a role to keep the pressure on. So, and
I will say, we're not always big fans of what Jay Shah does, but Jay Shah must have backed this for it to happen. So good on him for being on the right side of the issue.
Yeah, and let's hope he gets on the right side of history with some other bits that relate to the stuff that tends to frustrate us. So the 2-tier bit The way it's been reported, this is two-tier Test cricket, or two-tier World Test Championship to be more precise. It's been reported as it's been deferred for this cycle, but the truth is it couldn't have happened in this cycle, Jeff. The FTP, the Future Tours Program, which sits above the WTC, acronyms everywhere here, is locked in, which means
the FTP won't let me be.
The bilateral TV arrangement, so like CA and to pick but one, they have sold their TV rights on the basis of what's in the Future Tours Program. So they couldn't have tweaked it to the extent that was being mooted in the last few weeks or the last few months. So we kind of know what 25 to 27 looks like, but God knows what's coming after that. We know that they are working on the FTP for 27 and beyond right now. The reason we know that is this FTP was announced in, was it announced in like 2019 or something? It feels like years ago, right? So we're not far away from 27 onwards. It'll be 28, I think, formally when it starts, but the end of 27 when this one comes to an end. So it's a little bit of hold your breath stuff. There is clear momentum here in the way it's being talked about for there to be some division between what will constitute the World Test Championship and what everyone else will get. And that will need to be reflected in the WTC's architecture and how the Future Tours Program is pulled together. In the shorter term, though, how the point system will work in the next cycle of the Test Championship, 25 to 27, that feels like it's on the table. We still don't know what's going to happen there, but that conversation that was being advanced by, for instance, the ECB a couple of weeks ago about how they might have more points for away wins and that type of thing, that's where I think we're going to see more than tweaks before that first series is played, which I think from memory is Australia Windies, isn't it? Windies Australia is the first one of the new cycle. It wouldn't surprise me at all in sort of 2 months from now if Test cricket looks very different with how those series are played and the point structure that goes with them.
Yeah, I mean, we just don't have visibility on it. Like there are so many arguments that you can make, and I'm quite sympathetic to the idea that away victories should count for more, because if you beat up a team in your home conditions who's unsuited to it, that's what should happen. And if New Zealand go to India and turn them over 3-0, well, they probably should have been rewarded more handsomely for that, for such an unlikely result, but there'll always be disagreement about the finesse, about the detail, about it's going to be more complicated, right? I mean, the argument was that it was too complicated. It's actually not that complicated. The percentage system is okay. How many games did you win? What percentage of the matches you played was it? Fine, done. It's not actually like I can do those maths. This is going to be something else. It's going to be like Sheffield Shield style or county championship style. You're going to have bonus points for first innings. Are you going to have bonuses for how close the result is at the end, or whether it goes into a fifth day? What do you do with weather interruptions? Like, there are so many ways that you can make this complicated to a point that there's no natural understanding of how the results work. And in order for people to be excited about how a sporting contest works, it's got to be evident what the results mean. It has to be clear that if this team does this, then this, rather than having 10 different factors where you're like, well, how many points are they going to get and what do they end up with? And do they get, 33.8 points and then go ahead of this team? And then how many possible points could this team get to go back in front and so on? But it feels like that's the way it's heading.
One thing that came out of this meeting, which wasn't on the agenda, according to Tim Abram, who's an outstanding journalist at the BBC, is that T10 cricket is now, well, there are a couple of full members that are pushing for T20 format cricket to be recognised in the official stats. Now, in some respects, who cares? But in another,
10 over stuff.
This 10 over stuff would appear in like one's Crick Info page, and like it would have currency. Whereas at the moment, these are seen as exhibition tournaments, one being played at the Junction Oval right now, I should add, the one that's being played between the younger Australian cricketers and some other odds and sods to provide another product for Indian television by the sounds of things. But yeah, I mean, there's no reason to doubt the reporting on this. Tim Abraham is a fearless reporter. He's run into trouble being so fearless with ICC stuff before. So I don't doubt his yarn. The fact that it wasn't on the agenda and managed to get into the talking points via full members who brought it to the table suggests that this is going to become increasingly a big part of the short form offering in domestic land, which is a bit, I don't know where this demand
who wants
is.
it? Who's keen? I mean, is it it's the Guyana versus the non-Victorian Victoria teams? Like, who's playing this stuff? It's mostly being played in Abu Dhabi, and there was the Zimbabwe League. I think there's been a bit of Caribbean 10 over exhibition stuff, but they're not prominent leagues. So why is it enough of a priority to land on the ICC's
it might
table?
be, well, it might just be that it's a future proofing thing. It's where countries are looking at where they can find yet more space that doesn't exist in the international schedule and domestic schedule to plonk new tournaments.
Yeah.
I mean, the very fact that there's one being played in Melbourne in April is a sign of the times, right? So that's one to keep an eye on. Sourav Ganguly is going to remain boss of the cricket committee, which is the all-powerful ICC cricket committee. He's been there before, so like, I don't think anyone doubts that Ganguly knows what he's doing, but it's a new appointment. Like Temba Bavuma is now on that as the captain of South Africa. Jonathan Trott has had that experience coaching Afghanistan, so it isn't.
It's interesting that he got knifed as the BCCI boss for Jay Shah, and now is heading one of the more influential committees under Jay Shah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then one that didn't actually, I don't think this related to the meeting. Just by the way, the press release came out from ICC. But it confirmed that there will be 6 teams at the Olympic Games in LA in 2028. So 6 men, 6 women. That's been widely reported, but confirmed by the official body, and the venue as well, which is probably of more interest to you and I because we'll be out there. The fairgrounds at Pomona in Southern California. I had a Google. That's about 35 miles inland from the famous Coliseum, which will be the Olympic Stadium, and 44 miles from, it's got a commercial name like the SoFi, but it'll be called LA Stadium for the Olympic Games. So a little bit like judging by what Google tells me, not great public transport links. So it might be a bit like the World Cup was last year where we were in New York.
Hang on a minute. Hang on. Hold up here. Not great public transport in Los Angeles. Los Angeles, not great. Los Angeles, where it takes 4 hours to get from LAX to downtown using trains and buses. I know because I did it last year.
Well, I didn't know. I thought maybe there's a direct, if there's a direct train from town straight to where the cricket venue is, 35 miles might be a commutable thing, but this is not going to be commutable, I don't think. So I only raised that to say that when we were in New York, air quotes, last year, we weren't really in New York in the way people thought of it, were we? We were about an hour and a half away from New York City and I loved the experience of being on Long Island, and it was a really worthwhile experience. But this, I think, will have more that vibe where we'll be kind of out there near these fairgrounds, and then it'll be 6 teams duking it out. I assume that means 5-round robin, semi-final, final at better. I hope it's not 2 groups of 3, and them trying to squeeze it into like 4 days. That would be less nourishing, of course.
Well, and there's genuine concern, like not even making a joke of it at the moment, about athletes being able to get to the games, because who knows, with the rate at which US authorities are just randomly arresting people at the border, detaining people, kicking people out, like people who have valid visas, they're just being told, nah, don't fancy it, don't like the look of you, see you later. Punting people back home after keeping them in detention for days or weeks. It's a fraught business, and a lot of conferences cancelling, a lot of academic organisations are advising people not to travel to the US because you can't guarantee your safety under the current administration. Now they'll be very much towards the end of their notional 4-year term by the time the Olympics roll around, but who knows how that's going to pan out. I mean, it could be a disastrous situation for the Olympic Games if, I don't know, they decide to issue executive orders saying that every athlete who comes has to measure up to certain standards that the White House has decided. And I'm sure they will have a go at any trans athletes or any intersex athletes. I'm sure the US will try to interfere in making, because currently at the moment it's possible for some athletes to compete in some sports under Olympic rules. I'm sure the US administration will be trying to shut that down. So it's not a given that the Olympic Games will go ahead smoothly.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that. The first time I've really thought that it'll be a Trumpian Olympics too, won't it? He'll be campaigning for his 3rd term by then, middle of 2028, once the Constitution has been.
It'll be in the last few months.
I'm going the other way.
Once they've decided to
padding up to
have
go
the
again.
workaround.
Yeah, that's right. Whatever workaround's arrived at, and he's been talking about this recently, or when one of his dead shit sons is running to replace him. Either of those things could be chaotic and so on. But let's hope from a cricketing perspective that it's a real triumph of what we're trying to grow the game, aren't we? We're trying to have cricket on that global stage in a different way to how it ordinarily is. Now, remember that there's 2 things I want to remind people. The Olympic funding for countries that won't be in the top 6 will still filter through. And we talked about that with Spain last week. But Brazil, it's a big part of their story as well, that it's NOC funding that arrives with the federations that run the sport because it is an Olympic sport where it hasn't been before. That's an important part of all of this. And the other thing here is that it has to be T20 cricket. And I'm glad that's been confirmed. So we'll see the end of speculation about it being the 100 or about it being T10, as we were saying before. So this is all locked away in that media release, which is good. Jeff, just looking a little bit further ahead on Olympic matters for a sec, though. What about Brisbane 2032? So we know it's 6 teams for LA. And I know there are athlete caps with the Olympic Games at the moment, but just put that to one side for a moment here. In football, each continent is represented at World Cups, and that seems to work quite well. And we're seeing that in T20 World Cups of late as well, with the 20-team tournament that played out last year in the USA and an improved women's tournament that's following. I wonder whether that should be the model we look at for Brisbane. It'll be busy, but if you looked at having a tournament of 20 teams for men and women, and you open up qualifiers in parts of the world that don't normally get to have mass representation at World Cups. I'm thinking Europe, I'm thinking South America, coming back to that Brazil example before. I know it would take probably, 3 grounds in that scenario, Jeff, if you're running 2 tournaments side by side, 4 games per day, which we've seen happen before, where you're running, it happens with baseball, and baseball's back in the games in 2028, where you have match after match after match across from the early morning through to the late night, and whether you can get all your round robin games in, followed by semi-finals and a final, that'd be epic. You think about if cricket can go that way. I know there are challenges about athlete numbers, but dare to dream. This is when these conversations around Brisbane will start being had in the same way that the LA chat around cricket started a few years ago. It'll be now when they're weighing up what cricket at Brisbane might look like.
Well, they can play at Cusack because that's available now. So we'll repurpose that. And then, AB Field and maybe play at Toowoomba. Well, I'm sure there's a ground up there.
To be fair, they've played first-class cricket at Ian Healy Oval now, haven't they? I think from memory.
Yes.
I think Ian Healy Oval's been used. So AB, Ian Healy, the Gabba, there's your 3 grounds. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if they want to
doable.
It is doable. I'm not saying it'd be easy, but if you play the tournament, if it starts on day 1 and you've got a full fortnight to run it, and you're trying to get through, as I say, essentially 12 games per day, it would take some doing, but maybe that works. Maybe a 4th venue is required. I haven't done the sums in my head. But you know what I'm trying to say, Jeff, that if you provide that incentive to countries further down the rankings at the moment, saying that if you stick to it, there could be an opportunity to qualify for an Olympic Games in 2032, that'd be a terrific signal to send to the wider associate market, wouldn't it?
It would provide a different feel to it, because at the moment it's going to feel like an exhibition tournament with 6. Maybe that's what they want because they know that the quality will be high. If you've got a qualification for 6 sides, they're going to be the professional sides. But surely they'll be trying to crank an India-Pakistan game in there as well to try to make that happen one way or another. But yeah, for the international flavour, I think it's probably just the unwieldiness of trying to have that many teams, and whether a lot of Olympic associations where they don't have a really strong cricket team will be willing to foot the bill to send 15 more athletes to play in a sport where they're not expecting to do well.
And hopefully that's where the funding steps in. Jeff, one more thing on, I guess, international matters before we take a break and shift gears afterwards. Paul Marsh is the new Australian Cricketers Association boss, did some media during the week. He's fairly downbeat, it's fair to say, in line with that WCA report, which he helps co-author, I should say. If we don't get the scheduling sorted out in international cricket, so we actually work out how international cricket will coexist with domestic T20 competitions, international cricket's in trouble. Now, we all know that, but it's like quite a bit being said out loud by people with influence. I guess that's quite important, and we know that Australia's position on domestic T20 windows will be an interesting one. The extent to which they try and align with what's being talked about by the International Players Union, how many days of Test cricket this will mean across the year, especially for teams that make less money from it. Again, it's just reinforcing.
Especially if it becomes 2 tiers and you've got a second tier bunch of Test sides with very little incentive to play and not much time to do it because their best players are going to be required, or whether it just becomes a thing where Test sides continue without their T20 players in the way that West Indies have been doing for 15 years.
So it's a story of growth in some parts of the global game and contraction in others. Jeff, as we head into the first break, this show is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm. Some of Australia's best lawyers work at Maurice Blackburn, and all you need to do is pick up the phone or jump online and access them.
Get on the blower.
Most of the time on a no-win, no-fee basis. So if you feel daunted by the legal system, and with something like super insurance, I would totally get why that would be the case, where they've got a certain speciality that we've spoken about in the last couple of months. But this is where they're in your corner. They are there for working people and have been so since 1919. So the fact that we're able to talk about them for the next 12 months, but they're lawyers who have earned a lot of kudos to even get there in the first place. The reason they've gone into a joint like Maurice Blackburn is they want to work in this space. They don't want to be... They're incentivized to work on behalf of hardworking people. It draws a certain person in.
They're not there to rake in the cash.
No.
And if they're in your corner, I've always wondered about the being in your corner thing, the point of it, because you're boxing and you go and sit in the corner and the guy comes up and pats you on the shoulder and lets you spit in the bucket. And then what do they say? What do they actually tell you? They go out there and punch him in the face. Or in this time, punch him in the face a few more times. What are you getting told in the 20 seconds between rounds? But, MB's in your corner, they've got more time. You will not have just had a flurry of uppercuts to deal with. You might have had them metaphorically, but you won't have had them physically. And they'll be able to give you strategic advice, and they'll be able to help you be able to take on better resourced opponents in order to get what you're entitled to.
Simply search Maurice Blackburn or click through in the show notes to learn more about them for any of your legal needs. We'll take a break. When we return, we're heading to where I am here in England.